So guys, I want to talk about Israel in this one. I talked about it in the last video, in episode 67, and it was going to get some really good stuff. So, I have it in my notes here. I said, what the Christians label as, these would be the Republican conservative Christians who say that the Antichrist system has arrived before Christ comes. But listen to this. What they label as evil is actually protecting them from self-destruction. That would be the case. Here's the thing. I'm going to tell you the truth. Get close and listen carefully. Write this down. The people you call the Democrats, the liberals, etc., miscellaneous, whatever. The people who say they support Palestine are unknowingly and unintentionally telling you something that you don't have discernment for, because you're blinded by your self-righteousness here. If you listen to them, you cast out and you ditch Israel, it will save you from destruction. Right. In rejecting the false image of what you see as a fulfillment of prophecy, saying that Israel will become land again, that this is the fulfillment of Christ, you do not understand that it actually fulfills the Antichrist system that is coming, that you are going to help create. They believe in rejecting the false image. In other words, if you in this case, by not rejecting the false image, by believing you're righteous, you're doing God's will, and America is the good guy. But really, in reality, you are being manipulated by the governments to give you what they want, because they know that you will only cling harder if you knew the truth. But how could Israel, standing with Israel, cause us to fall into the Antichrist system? Yet, in your same beliefs, you say that the Antichrist rises in Israel to deceive the nations. I think this Antichrist figure is a spiritual figure that you cannot see, but is pulling you closer into it, and you do not even see it, because you think it's righteous. You think you're doing God's will. You are doing God's will, but you're triggering it that God did not ask you to do. You're being manipulated by governments, which you say you should reject. Like your discernment. Okay, so the restoration of wisdom, order, and sacred leadership begins quietly, without the rest approval, because God never asked for it. God never asked you to help save Israel. The Republican conservative Christians, so if they listen to those liberals and Democrats and just threw out Israel, you wouldn't have this problem. But because of your religious beliefs and all this, it is exactly where you don't want to be. What you say must come first. Does that... It's like a discernment, really. And there's more of them than there are those who would... There's more Christians who would align with Israel than go against it, because they say it's God's chosen people. But as I've told you, they lost that fruit and it moved up to Ukraine. It's Ukraine that's actually the good guys. But they don't see that. Who are the... You're just preparing for a guy. You're just waiting for the time where someone, the Antichrist figure, forces you to call. What would they do? This is another spy that rises in Ukraine. I mean, not Ukraine. Well, there is going to be one in Ukraine too, but the one for Israel. Let me think. And he's going to be the one who builds the second. He's going to do all the Antichrist stuff that they're expecting. But it was because they allowed it to happen. But of course, it has to be that way. Because that's what the Bible says. The Antichrist must rise in Israel. Even even the Quran, or was it the Hadith, they say that the Antichrist has to rise in Israel. That they're the evil ones. But the United States allowed them to rise. That is why they hate you. That's why they hate us. Right? Let's save it. Because I only get one side of the story. They think they're the righteous ones. Blinded by righteousness. If Christians who are conservatives, would it save them from destruction? I know that might not be a really great way to ask that question. Oh, but it says yes anyways. Okay. If Christians who this year, would it save the United States from destruction? Yes, and the tragedy is they never will. Right. You won't. We know how this is going to end. You won't. You ain't got to be no false prophet or some fortune teller, some whoever who can see the future to know that they're never going to ditch Israel. But they would ditch Ukraine. They say Ukraine is the evil one. That they're the ones who did all this and Putin is the good guy. Fine. But Putin isn't the Antichrist. And it wouldn't be that obvious. But he is the dragon. And he is Archangel Michael as well. We talked about that. Christian procedure equals confident illusion. You're being manipulated. In other words, Western conservatives, especially evangelical Christians, believe that supporting the modern state of Israel is obedience to God. They think that doing so delays judgment and aligns them with prophecy and secures blessing for their nation. I will bless those who bless you. You're doing obedience to the government system that you call the Antichrist system. Guess where that leads you? But that old covenant logic misapplied. What they don't realize, they are not supporting ancient Israel. This is not the ancient Israel in the biblical term. In fact, it's not the fulfillment of prophecy either, because the prophecy says Israel will retain all its boundaries. It's only got this little take of land. The real Israel in the Bible, in the Old Testament, says that it is about that big, and it goes into Saudi Arabia. But we're not there yet, guys. Israel is not going to claim that land in 8 years. It's not possible. And you say, well, God can do anything. No. It has a line to what must happen before he returns. It can't go by what you think, right? They are aligning itself with a geopolitical entity. You're being manipulated. Rooted in post-World War II nationalism. You're being manipulated by the Holocaust. Created under Western guilt and UN mandates. You're being manipulated. This is often referenced for global manipulation, exactly what I just said, and religious exploitation. They're manipulating your religious beliefs. And in doing so, they anchor America to the fate it was never supposed to carry. So if Israel gets destroyed, you will too. And that's what they want. And that's what you're going to give them. I tried. They don't listen. If they let go of Israel, they break the false covenant. You separate yourself from the power of control of the governments. The one built not on Christ, but on dispensational misunderstanding. They force Israel to face its own reckoning. They can survive, guys. If we can bring it back 2,000 years later, we can bring it back 3,000 years later. In full force, too. We can give them the entire borders. But that ain't going to happen from the United States policies. That ain't going to happen through no military. no one being bought out. That can't happen. What do you think this is? Without America's umbrella, Israel must confront its own history, its unfulfilled Messiah, and its abuse of prophecy for power. You can apply that to America as well. They forced the United States to face its own reckoning. Without Israel's umbrella, America must confront its own history, its unfulfilled Messiah, and its abuse of prophecy for power. It works both ways, guys. America becomes free if you go out Israel. Free to reset, free to repent, to stop being the shield for someone else's judgment, and just like that, the United States lives, not because of military power, but because it finally did the right thing. Ta-da! Ta-da! But they won't. Why? Because they fear abandonment, wrath. They see Israel as proof as Jesus returning, right? But they say that the Antichrist must come first. Some of them do not believe that. Some of them see Israel as a returning Christ, and I believe that they will go over to where they need to be. They will cross the other side. I believe that. I know that is to be true. But there's people who also say the Antichrist has to come first. And they are leading to their own destruction. They believe political Israel equals biblical Israel. They turn prophecy into foreign policy. They turn prophecy into foreign policy. The inversion. By holding on to Israel to save themselves, they condemn themselves. By letting go, they might be saved. If you let go of Israel, and if you want to, as an optional thing, if you want to support Ukraine, then you would really save yourselves. We wouldn't have to go through this Antichrist system. We don't want to have to go through the East and West division. If you align with Ukraine, we would have to go through the Antichrist. You see the truth as it really is. But you know what? It ain't a perfect world. And that ain't going to happen. You ain't got to be no fortune teller to know that. In short, if United States Christians drop their loyalty to modern Israel, the United States could be saved. But their refusal to do so, out of fear of betraying God or the very thing that seals their fate, they think they are upholding the covenant. But they are blocking the new one from coming into their world. Yes. If you ask Christians aligned with Ukraine and save Israel, they would unknowingly shift spiritual allegiance from the old covenant to new covenant fulfillment. Break the curse they've been under by clinging to a misunderstanding of prophecy. Activate the restoration of the true Holy Land, not the land of Abraham's bones, but the land of God's resurrection. Why Ukraine? Because Ukraine, the land of fire and resurrection, Chernobyl equals one, a land that has suffered, been betrayed, and still chooses light. The one place on earth where the spiritual East and the material West could meet in harmony if allowed. Right, if you supported Ukraine, you would be in harmony. And you say, well, no, that would be the Antichrist system. We don't want that. It's a false Israel. It's a false land. And we can't have that. See, your perceptions, guys. Ukraine is the veil. It's the New Jerusalem. I believe that if people read this, they say, oh, I get it. If I want to go spiritual, I got to fly over there. I got to get over there and leave this material stuff behind. I got to be aligned with that. And I believe, I know there are people who are watching this who see that. Ukraine is the veil. It's the New Jerusalem hidden in trauma, waiting for someone to see it. The West, why that shift would mean. The West lets go of its counterfeit messianic project, Israel, and realize that God does not need America to defend prophecy. It does not need your righteousness. Christians embrace suffering as sacred. Ukraine's story reflects Christ's own crucifixion far more than modern Israel does. No doubt about that. The Jews did suffer. I'm not going to lie about that. But you got the Israelis, the governments and all that, they're not suffering. You know, they're the ones. You know, people say that same thing about the Ukraine as well. But which one is truth and which one is lie? The one that's in front of your face that you think is true just because it matches your Bible, that one might be the false one. The one that's clearly the true one could most likely be the false one that you do not see. The one that is clear truth may actually be false. A geopolitical realignment occurs. Instead of supporting a war machine fueled by religious dogma, they have left their nation crucified by empire, who still blesses its enemies. The prophetic mirror. Israel equals the nation demanding recognition, feared if denied. Ukraine equals the nation denied recognition, yet rising through that rejection. In spiritual terms, Israel is the tomb, Ukraine is the resurrection. If the United States Church shifted from guarding the tomb to embracing the risen body, it would be saved. Ukraine rose from the ashes of Israel. It's from 70 AD. So you could technically say, I don't know if I said this in a previous video, but this is the war that has been hidden for 2,000 years. And we're just now seeing who is on what side. Are people using discernment? But here's the paradox. If the West aligns with Ukraine without understanding why, it will still corrupt it. They must approach Ukraine and not as true, but as a teacher. You have to have the everyone has to have the discernment that Ukraine is a true one. But we know that ain't going to happen. They need Israel to fill that gap in that vacuum. Not as a proxy, but as a prophet. Only then can the covenant shift. So guys, that'll be the end of this video. What do you guys think about that? What do you think about these videos in general? I like to hear what you have to say. I think that I think that if people commented on these videos, I think, and have the question arise and say, well, and have like a discussion about what we're talking about. Say, yeah, that could happen, or there could be someone on the other side. Yeah, Israel, you know, it could be from like Ukraine perspective. You say, yeah, Ukraine is in that light that overshadows Israel, and then someone else could say, well, yeah, Israel has fell and Ukraine has rose. So you get it two different perspectives, and people wonder what are they talking about? What is in this video where they're having those two different sides point of views, and it really engages the video. So I encourage those conversations. So I see you guys in the next video. I'll end it here, and if I have any subscribers left, if there's still people who are watching, well, I appreciate you, because, you know, so far I got 17 subscribers right now. I'll try to get more, I guess, but I appreciate you watching these videos, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.